Hi. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Thor, for putting me the last before lunch. This is always a challenge. And thank you, everyone, for great talks this morning. This has been really inspiring, and what an amazing event and venue. Well done. How we eat, how we regard food, and the ecosystem around food is a highly political issue in today's world. It's not just about distribution and the economy. It's not just about the fact that planet Earth has more than 7 billion mouths to feed, and we can't manage to feed all of them. It's not just because a similar number of people are suffering from obesity as there are people who are starving. It's political because our relationship with food reflects a general disconnection between our brains and bodies, between each other, between us and planet Earth. If I can have slide number 2, please. So the disconnection lies inside us, in a sense, and this has ripple effects on the world in which we live. So let's think about this disconnection for a moment, and I want to share with you a personal story of myself. I had a burnout before I turned 30. I was working for the UN in a very demanding environment after the war in Kosovo. I worked for an organization that celebrated long working hours. Perfect for me, the workaholic, right? And so the more you worked, the better the results. That's what I thought. I gave it everything I had, and I constantly reacted to what needed to be done, without checking in on myself, without thinking about how I could re-energize myself. And to be honest, my attitude was that it was a sign of weakness if I was to stop and reflect how I was doing, faced with the big challenges that we were at the time. But in hindsight, I was basically running ahead of myself. My mind was light years away from my body and my soul. I wasn't present, and I ignored all the warning signs that I was getting from my body. And I think that I just simply considered my body as a transport for my brain between meetings. So my eating habits reflected that attitude, and part of my healing process was simply to learn to eat again, to think about what I consumed, the nutrition that was in the food, and why it was important to make beautiful dishes, for example. I needed to learn how to mindfully make a sandwich and not work while I was doing it. That was totally new for me. On a bigger scale, burnout is increasing. There are many and complex reasons behind this, but the essence is disconnection. It's actually considered a luxury to take a moment to reflect, to have a moment with yourself, to set your own boundaries. And for a long time, we have overemphasized linear, rational, and short-term thinking at the cost of learning to be mindful and to see things in context, how they relate to each other. For example, we've been taught that the organs inside our body are not connected to one another. We have been taught that once we go to work, we should leave our emotions outside the door. As the performance artist Marina Abramovic, who is one of the contributors in a feature documentary coming out this year called Innsæi, The Sea Within, as Marina points out, we live in our heads and not with emotions, so something must be deeply wrong. Can I have the third slide, please? So we all know the feeling of stuffing our faces with food because we're running around, we're really busy. We don't have time all the time to think about, is this organically grown? Where does it come from? What does it do for me? We don't have time for that, right? So I want to show you a clip from Kung Fu Panda. The clip shows us when Grandmaster Oogway, an elderly tortoise and a wise man, sees Po unmindfully comfort eating, not just from a tree, but from a sacred tree. He's doing that because he's finding it difficult to cope with life's challenges.
You have found a sacred peach tree of heavenly wisdom.
Oh. Is that what this is? I am so sorry. I thought it was just a regular peach tree.
I understand. You eat when you are upset.
Upset? I'm not upset. What makes you think I'm upset?
So why are you upset?
I probably sucked more today than anyone in the history of Kung Fu, in the history of China, in the history of sucking.
Probably.
And the 5. Man, you should have seen them. They totally hate me.
Totally.
How's Shifu ever gonna turn me into the Dragon Warrior? I mean, I'm not like the 5. I've got no claws, no wings, no venom. Even Mantis has those thingies. Maybe I should just quit and go back to making noodles.
Quit, don't quit. Noodles, don't noodles. You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
So how present are we? We live in a fast-paced world with overload of information, distraction, and stimuli, which is challenging our ability to mindfully connect with the moment, here and now. The world is changing faster and it's more complex than ever before. We have no idea what the world will look like in 10 years from now, as we've seen this morning. 65% of school kids will be doing jobs in the future that haven't been invented. This is communication over the internet in 2003. And for me, this is basically a picture of the world we live in. At the same time, we're faced with climate change. Our very basis of existence is threatened in so many ways. Conflicts, polarization, which is dividing human beings instead of bringing us closer. The World Health Organization projects that in 2020, which is 4 years from now, depression will be the leading cause of disability in the Western world. Now, this is not only a question of well-being. This is a huge economical issue. This is costing us a lot of money, and it's costing us a lot of talent. Part of the reason behind all this is because we don't know how to listen to ourselves and our own bodies. Imagine that. When we get signals that enough is enough, we don't even know how to read into them. Because of this, we have now reached the state where schools have started to teach children systematically to connect within. We are teaching children to know their own feelings. We are teaching children to be empathetic and to calm their minds. And I think that this tells us a lot about the world that we live in today. So there's no coincidence that mindfulness and mindful eating is reaching headlines. It's because of our lack of it. There are many guidelines that you can find online about what mindful eating is. And I seriously thought about bringing grapes to this meeting and giving one to each and every one of you and guide you through a mindfulness eating exercise, which is, I think, a bit of a torture right now because we're all getting really hungry. But it would be something like this. I would give you a grape and you would put it in your hand and you would feel it with your fingers. You would touch it. And then you would watch it and you would look at the shape of it and you would think about the color. What a miracle of nature the grape is. And then I would tell you to smell it and think about where it comes from. Is it organically grown? How is it grown? Who made it? Who's touched it before you're touching it? You would put it up to your nose and you would smell it and you would sense how everything would start to evolve. You know, because before we put the grape into our stomach, we actually start to digest it with our eyes, our nose, and our fingertips. The taste buds go crazy. And just before you put it in your mouth, you think, you check in with yourself and you ask yourself, am I really hungry? Do I need this grape? Am I eating because I'm just bored or I don't know what else to do? But then you decide you want to eat it, then you put it into your mouth and then you digest it. This is a long process and nobody has time for this. But what this does, and the relationship to our own well-being, our relationship with food and the whole food system, is that it aligns us. It connects the body with the mind. It teaches us to be mindful about what we eat and where it comes from. Mindful eating actually calms down mind chatter, which is very common. You know, we have these thoughts going on in our heads all the time. It slows them down. It's like meditation, deep breathing, and yoga. Highly recommended, when you have the time, of course. But what we're doing when we're doing this is that we're paying attention to what it is we pay attention to, and that's the key. To pay attention to what it is we pay attention to. It sounds very simple, because we pay attention to a lot of things, but we pay attention to only a fraction of the things that we are stimulated by every second. So we don't actually pay attention to what it is we pay attention to, we just pay attention. But when we pay attention to what it is we pay attention to, we shift the center of gravity. Imagine this. We shift the center of gravity in the way that we sense the world, in the way that we innovate, live, and create. And it helps us to tap into the 98% of consciousness, or the brain, that we usually ignore. So mindfulness eating is part of a bigger development. The interesting thing that the now, the present, that we keep hearing about has always been here. We just haven't been paying attention to it. Remember the short clip I showed you of Po, the Kung Fu Panda? I love that film anyway, if anybody hasn't seen it. It's really great. When he was eating unmindfully from the tree. I want to leave you with a story of colonialism and the Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai from Kenya. Maathai got the Nobel Peace Prize for planting trees and paying attention to roots of trees. This had revolutionary ripple effects on politics, people, and the natural environment in Kenya. Can I have the last slide, please? Maathai was born and raised in the highlands of Kenya. When her parents were growing up, they had 4 seasons. It snowed in the winter, and starvation was unheard of. When the colonial power invaded Kenya, they uprooted the strong Kenyan trees and planted European trees instead, which would grow faster, and they could cut them down and ship them over to Europe en masse, and hence boost their economy. They did this totally unmindful of what it meant for Kenya. But the Kenyan trees had extremely strong roots that would dig their way deep into the earth, through rocks and into fresh water. And in return, the fresh water would reach the surface, water the ecosystem, and people would have access to fresh water. But the imported trees had weak roots that could not serve the same purpose. So over time, their certification became a problem. And the people lost connection to the spiritual and sustainable relationship they used to have with the environment. So in some ways, I think we might be going back to the roots. We are realizing how disconnected we've become, and we want to reconnect with ourselves, each other, and planet Earth. For the rest of today, I want to encourage you to pay attention to what it is you pay attention to, and do it with all your senses. Thank you.